Coming up, the Raptors win in Miami while Boston takes its first loss in Chicago. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Daniella Bruce, and thank you for making Locked On Game to Game your first listen every weekday. Subscribe to Locked On NBA and your team's local Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. We've got all our Locked On NBA hosts here with us today to tell you everything you need to know from Monday in the NBA. The Pacers took to the road for the first time this season and lost to the Sixers in Philly. After getting overmatched on Monday, Locked On Pacers explains why Indiana had so much trouble against the 76ers Stars.
The Indiana Pacers lose their first road game of the season in Philadelphia to the 76ers. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, telling you why the Pacers are going to struggle against teams like the Sixers, who have two superstars. Pacers are going to struggle defending these guys in general. Most teams do, but they are unfit when both are on the court to defend really well. Pacers have struggled with defense all season, but even doubling Embiid finishes with 26 points on just 13 shots. James Harden, same kind of deal, 29 points, nearly a triple-double, 11 assists and 9 rebounds for Harden. He was a plus 16. They doubled Embiid sometimes when he was in the game, but either way, the Pacers just didn't have a good matchup for either of those guys. All their bigs are either not quick enough or weren't quite strong enough in this game. They couldn't stay in front of Harden, and for a Pacers team that struggled with defense all year, the Sixers, who can stagger superstars, are a tough matchup. So despite big second halves from Tyrese Haliburton, from Benedict Mather, and Pacers lose, we'll have more on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
The Raptors took a win in a low-scoring affair in Miami against the Heat. Our Locked On Raptors host says Pascal Siakam was the difference, again in Toronto getting the win.
Now that is a fourth quarter. Sean Woodley here from Locked On Raptors to break down the Toronto Raptors 98-90 win over the Miami Heat in Miami on Monday night to pick up a split of a pair of games down in South Beach Saturday and Monday, moving to 2-2 on the season. And the big reason for this, the big reason for everything good that's happened for the Raptors so far this year is Pascal Siakam. Bit of a rough shooting night for him. There was no Scotty Barnes for the Raptors in this one as he's sidelined with an ankle injury. And so it was really all on Pascal's shoulders for long stretches of this game to create offense for the Raptors. And while the Heat threw a ton of attention his way and he had a rough shooting night, just 7 of 22, his playmaking was incredible. The defense was there as well. 23 points, 9 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks for Siakam, who continues his torrid start. And for the Raptors, they closed this game out on a 27-9 run, just running the Heat off their own floor over the final 9 minutes of this game. I will have more on this game to break down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Raptors. Be sure to tune in.
The Heat gave up a lead in the fourth and let Siakam and the Raptors win in Miami. Our Locked On Heat host was not happy with how Miami let that game slip away.
The Miami Heat were outscored by 13 points in the fourth quarter with Jimmy Butler inexplicably sitting on the bench, and that was the difference as the Heat lost 98-90 to the Toronto Raptors and dropped to 1-3 on the season. I'm David Ramil, the co-host of Locked On Heat. Miami was taking on Toronto for the second straight game at home and were somewhat shorthanded with Caleb Martin and Nikola Jovic suspended for one game following an altercation with Toronto's Christian Koloko on Saturday. But that isn't the real problem, as the Heat have started the year lacking communication on defense and totally discombobulated on offense, where every possession seems like a struggle to generate any points. You're not getting it done with Butler on the bench. After leading Miami to an 8-point lead in the third, Butler set out to start the final period, didn't enter until under 5 minutes left to play. By that point, the Raptors had regained the lead and they wouldn't relinquish it. Miami squandered yet another good opportunity, particularly disappointing because they lost 3 or 4 games at home to start the season and now head off on a West Coast road trip to take on Portland, Golden State, and Sacramento. Can they find their identity on offense? Subscribe to Locked On Heat to find out.
The Knicks kept the Magic winless by beating Orlando in the Garden on Monday night. Locked On Knicks liked how many different players got in on the effort, while Locked On Magic tries to find a way to snap this losing streak.
The Knicks win 115-102 over the Orlando Magic, and it was a lot of magic on the Knicks side in this game. 3 starters over 20 points in this one: Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, and RJ Barrett. It's great to see the starting lineup for the Knicks after how woeful they were last year, now showing that they really have a lot of juice with those starters. Mitchell Robinson also in double figures with 14 points in this game. But the bench played fantastic as well. Emmanuel Quickly playing down the stretch with the starters, had 8 assists despite not scoring. Obi Toppin, 10 points in just 14 minutes. Cam Reddish continued his good play, 7 points in 14 minutes. And these Knicks, they're playing together, which is probably the first time you could really say that since like the 12-13 season. It's a beautiful thing to see. The Knicks are 2-1, and we'll see how things go from here, but things are looking very much up in New York right now.
I'm Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic. The Orlando Magic fall to the New York Knicks 115-102 to drop to 0-4. And all these losses, they sound kind of the same. The key for the Orlando Magic in all 4 of their losses is their lack of identity, their lack of cohesion, their lack of composure. It's only a few moments of every game when the Magic seem to lose grip of things and end up losing, and tonight was the first time they lost by more than 10 points. But you watch the New York Knicks and you see how they understand exactly what they're supposed to do. They are a veteran team. They know each other's roles. They know where each other's going to be. They know what they're supposed to do at every moment. They don't ever panic, or they didn't tonight at least. The Orlando Magic are not that team. They're extremely young. They only have one working point guard and Cole Anthony out on the floor, and they look like a team that doesn't always play under control. And that's going to be the real key for the Orlando Magic to get that first win and to start leveling up, as they like to call it. They need to start getting that control, start playing at their pace, and start taking command of the game. If they don't, they're going to keep losing just like this. We'll have more on Locked On Magic coming up later tonight. Until then, I've been Philip Rossman-Reich of Locked On Magic. We'll see you then.
Coming up, Utah's undefeated start is over and the Grizzlies outscore the Nets. This is Locked On Game to Game. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm Daniella Bruce, and thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Celtics lost for the first time this season to the Bulls in Chicago, thanks to a big Bulls run in the middle quarters. Locked On Celtics explains what went wrong for Boston, and Locked On Bulls has the winning side.
The Celtics had it all working, and then it all went away. I'm John Corrales from the Locked On Celtics podcast, and after a 19-point early lead, the Celtics bench gave it all back, which is surprising because Malcolm Brogdon and that bench are generally really good, but not in this one. And when the starters got back in, they could just never get back on track. The Bulls had momentum. The Bulls were attacking. They were attacking the offensive glass. They got putbacks. They took advantage of every weakness the Celtics had. And on the other end, the Celtics just tried to answer. They didn't try to play basketball. And so the lesson for me here is very simple. The Celtics are a great team when they play great basketball. They can't just go out there and relax. They can't go out there and just think teams are going to fall by the wayside just by the fact the Celtics are on the floor. The Celtics have to continue cutting. They have to continue passing. They have to continue attacking the rim. That's the formula.
The Chicago Bulls topped the Boston Celtics 120-102. I'm Pat the Designer, host of Locked On Bulls, and the Bulls came out struggling early on in this game, but by the end of it, they finished out with a 120-102 win using the defense and offense of one young man, Ayo Dosunmu, and of course, 18 and 23 from Nikola Vucevic will always give you a help. DeMar DeRozan chipped in with 25 points as well, and the Bulls really used just the defense, not only from the starting unit, but also bringing in the bench unit and Billy Donovan being able to stagger both units together to really make the Celtics struggle. You saw them continue to close out on shots after the Celtics got out to that early lead, knocking down 8 of 9 3-pointers to leave the first quarter. But by the end of it, right, Celtics only led by 9, and the Bulls continued to eat away at the lead, finally take the lead and hold on to it. For more in-depth analysis, man, tune in to Locked On Bulls over on the Locked On Network. Appreciate you guys for showing love. We'll see you over there.
The hot streak to start the season ended on Monday for the Jazz as the Houston Rockets spoiled the party by beating Utah for the first time this season. Locked On Rockets takes you through the 3 20-point scorers who helped Houston to the win.
The Houston Rockets win a nail-biter against the red-hot Utah Jazz to earn their first win of the NBA season, and they did it with Jabari Smith Jr. playing at the 5 spot. What's up? This is Jackson Gatlin from Locked On Rockets. The Houston Rockets have fought hard through their first 4 games of the season. They finally earned their first win against a very, very competitive and good Utah Jazz team. Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., and Jabari Smith Jr. all going for 20-plus points in this game. Jalen Green had a monster third quarter. Kevin Porter Jr. subsequently had a big fourth quarter. But the key to the game, Jabari Smith Jr., who looked fantastic on both sides of the basketball, playing the 5 spot for a depleted Houston Rockets team that was missing both Bruno Fernando and Alperen Şengün. Jabari Smith Jr. hit 4 free throws at the end of regulation to put this game away for the Houston Rockets. We're going to break it all down for you right over at Locked On Rockets.
The Memphis Grizzlies won a shootout in Memphis against the Nets. Locked On Nets and Grizzlies go over how Memphis found a way to outscore Brooklyn in the end.
The Brooklyn Nets fall 134-124 on the road to the Memphis Grizzlies. First road game of the season for the Brooklyn Nets. And ultimately, the physicality that Memphis is able to provide in support of Ja Morant seemed to be what moved the needle in this one. Third quarter, the Brooklyn Nets stagnated offensively, could not get the ball movement they saw in the first half. And then once again, late in this one, maybe a bad foul call. Who cares about the referees? Ben Simmons fouls out for another game, and that puts the Nets in a difficult spot trying to claw back in. Kyrie Irving turns it on late, but again, really just physical presence from Memphis ground down the Brooklyn Nets in the second half of this one. They fall by 10. Not a terrible game. A lot of positive takeaways, and we'll break it all down on the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.
The best young backcourt in the National Basketball Association plays for the Memphis Grizzlies, and that was on full display in Memphis against the Brooklyn Nets tonight. I am Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies. And riddle me this, dear listener, dear viewer. When you have 2 players under the age of 25 who are capable of going off for 38 points in the same game, combining for 76, how much better can things get? Probably not much. And Desmond Bane and Ja Morant did exactly that in this contest. 38 points for Morant, 38 points for Bane, a dangerous twosome. But the thing that really stood out in this game beyond the dominance of Morant and Bane is the hustle plays of young Santi Aldama, the veteran presence and aggression of Steven Adams. Morant and Bane are going to get the highlights, and rightfully so. But make no mistake, this was a team win for the Grizzlies, leaving it all on the floor to beat a very game Brooklyn Nets team led by Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
The Minnesota Timberwolves only lost by 11 on Monday, but it wasn't nearly that close most of the way against the Spurs. Locked On Timberwolves tells you why San Antonio had Minnesota's number just about all night.
The Minnesota Timberwolves were blown out at home on Monday night by the San Antonio Spurs. This is Ben Beacon with Locked On Wolves, and while the final deficit might have only been 9 points, don't let that fool you. This game was not close. The Wolves had to use a 33-5 pretty much meaningless fourth quarter run to make the final score look respectable. The Spurs ran all over the Wolves. The transition defense for Minnesota was terrible. The half court offense was with not enough ball movement, sloppy turnovers, poor rebounding. The Wolves never got into a flow. And while they were only down by 9 at halftime, and the third quarter again was what took this thing from bad to worse. This was just an overall disappointing performance for Minnesota. The final lines for the likes of Cat and D'Lo, they look okay, but through 3 quarters, it was very miserable. Again, offensive ball movement, transition defense were the biggest issues. An all-around terrible game from D'Angelo Russell. We're going to break it all down on the post-game podcast today. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Wolves for all things Timberwolves.
The Portland Trail Blazers are still undefeated after beating the Nuggets last night, and Locked On Blazers is starting to believe that this could be more than just a hot start.
The Blazers are undefeated for the first time since the 99-2000 season. I'm Mike Richmond, host of the Locked On Blazers podcast. Anthony Simon erupted for 22 of his 29 in the third quarter. Damian Lillard adds 31, and the Blazers improved to 4-0 with a 135-110 beatdown of the Denver Nuggets. After 3 games, winning close to begin the season, they come back, first game, the second night of a back-to-back, the first back-to-back of the year, and they just beat the Nuggets down. It wasn't close in the second half. The best part of this run is that it feels sustainable. When Dame's rolling and he gets help from Anthony Simons, this team can beat anybody, which we saw tonight. On to Miami on Wednesday.
That's all for Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you all for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Again, make sure to subscribe to Locked On NBA and your team's Locked On podcast for more NBA coverage every day of the week. I'm Daniella Bruce, and this has been Locked On Game to Game.